Well, it's a good thing we're getting into the cooler weather and I don't have to empty the dehumidifiers down in the basement anymore because I am not going down there for a while. Barbarian. Um, I don't, I feel like people are starting to hear about this. I don't know how much people know, and I am going to have to talk about this in spoiler and non spoiler sections of this. It's a horror movie. It is intense. Um, Intense in a way that I don't generally engage in with horror movies. I have, oh boy, structurally, this thing is amazing. And its first act is basically impeccable. It is one of the most perfect suspense filled first acts for a horror movie I have ever seen or expect I will ever see in a film ever. And it basically really only works if you don't know much going in. And other than people telling me I should watch it, thanks Jesse, I didn't really know much about it. And I think that is the perfect way to actually go into this. If you like intense, incredibly stressful horror films, this is right up your alley. But if you find yourself wondering, well, okay, but I don't like all style, regardless of intensity, like I favor slashers or I prefer ghost stories or I prefer monster movie, if you have more preferences in your horror in that kind of area, then you might end up with sort of the issue that I ended up having. And I'm trying to think of the spoiler-free way to say this. Again, structurally, this thing is amazing. It's fantastic. And that first act I would preserve in a museum. It's so good. It's not that it falls apart after that. It's that once the specifics of exactly what is going on become clear, those specifics aren't enjoyable for me. And that's kind of where I need to begin and end it. For my own preferences of what I do or don't favor in terms of things used to like get under your skin in a horror or suspense movie, the specifics of what's going on don't appeal to me. And if they were not presented as well as they are, I would probably actually really like this movie and I might have shut it off partway through. I didn't, again, largely because the structure is just so really good. Even though the absolute unimpeachable best part of it is the first act. That, again, is not to imply that it completely falls apart after that. But how you feel about it once you're at the very end is probably going to depend a lot on what you specifically do or don't care for in terms of specifics, in terms of explanation, exactly what is going on. Because when you're watching that first act, there's a lot of possibilities of what could be going on. And I don't want to tell you what it is until we get to the spoiler section. And honestly, we might need to do that right away because I really can't say anything more than that. If you like intense horror films, yeah, you should try this because dang, it is brilliantly structured, really just smartly written. There's a lot of very incredibly well executed commentary on a shocking number of things, none of which feels shoehorned in. There is commentary on, the way that people are perceived by others, the manner in which certain kinds of people tend to perceive themselves. And I know I'm talking in vagaries, but I have to until I get to spoilers. So that's your spoiler free. It's really good, but some of the specifics of what's going on make me basically not want to ever watch it again personally. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So I got to talk spoilers now to talk about what's really good and what didn't work for me personally. So you've had your warning. If you are into this kind of thing, I hope you've now gone to see the movie. If you're sticking around, it's either because you either know you don't want to watch it anyway, or you've already seen it. So here we go. Act 1, as I said, is structural genius. It is brilliantly executed because, especially if you've gone in and don't know where this is going or what's going on, the number of possibilities, especially as the situation is set up and we have our initial character of Tess, and she gets to this Airbnb following what appears to be a breakup, and there's already somebody there. It's a guy named Keith, played by Bill Skarsgård, very famously portrayed Pennywise the Clown in It. Now, ultimately, and again, we are in spoilers here. That's a reiteration of the warning. He is not the threat. But first of all, just casting him was a bit of meta genius because people associate him with being something really dangerous, especially in a horror movie. So it's not that you automatically assume he is the threat, but that possibility never leaves your mind. And the way he is portrayed, you don't know, is he just kind of a little bit socially awkward? Or is this the mask he puts on because he wants to go after Tess and he intends to do something really, really horrible to her? And Tess, who's played by Georgina Campbell, I need to shout her out because I'm going to mention some of the actors, and she's amazing. She deserves to be known. She's really good. So she, you start from her perspective. So she is tense around this guy. She can't find another place to go. And it feels in a way very contrived, like there happens to be a convention in town, so like all the hotels are booked up. It's not a great neighborhood, so she can't safely just stay out in her car. And all these things that kind of put her in a situation where maybe staying here at least until she can sort something out is the best idea, but can she trust this guy? And she very much does not, and therefore the audience also does not. But again, the situation, is riding the line between this could be something he orchestrated and is targeting her for. And while it pushes credibility that it's just a coincidence that things lined up this way, it's not impossible that that's what happened. And ultimately, it does end up being that way. And it rides that line perfectly to give you that tension. And then later on, when she's asleep, a door creaks open and there's this weird noise. And Keith appears to be asleep on the couch. So what are we dealing with? Is this Keith is some kind of threat to her and this is a trap? Is this a haunted house? Is this a ghost story? Is there a monster? Is there a cult? Is there an alien? It literally could be anything. And I love that period of time when it could literally be anything. Because even the title doesn't give it away. The title is a play on where the house is located. It's on Barbary Street. So that's where you get Barbarian from. So you really don't know what it's going to be. And the tension, because you don't know, is the threat Keith? Is the threat something else? What is going on in the damn basement? And boy, uncovering the basement is an onion peel, because even as she finds this secret door and what basically amounts to a kidnap room and uncovers all this, you still don't know, does Keith know, or is he going to be as surprised as she is? And then, he finds that he didn't know. He's surprised, but you're still wondering, is this an act? Is he trying to lure her back down to the basement that she just scrambled her butt out of? But then there's a deeper layer and the tunnels, and then there's what they actually encounter down there. And that's kind of where we start to get into the bit that doesn't really work for me. And again, this has to do with personal taste and what I just tend to think of as the ick factor, which is, I think most people have something that just as a thing just kind of makes them go, ugh. And not like in a fun, that gave me a jolt way, but like in a, ugh. I feel like I need a shower now kind of way. And the explanation for exactly what's going on here, involving decades of kidnapping and sexual assault and incest, to result in what is effectively a monster for all intents and purposes, is unpleasant in a way that is not enjoyable for me. And one could argue that it's not meant to be enjoyed, but given some of the things that happen way later in the film, I do think there is meant to be at least a little bit of enjoyment here. It's not meant to be a miserable viewing experience. It's just meant to be an intense one, which it absolutely is. But as far as that kind of stuff as a background story goes, it's handled about as well as it can possibly be handled. Because we actually never, ever see any of the sexual assaults happen, nor do we see any of the female victims that we know existed by various things that are shown. We know exactly what happened. It's incredibly clear, but it's not shown, which is deeply appreciated because that would have been exploitative to the point that I might have checked out, where even how well structured it wasn't going to keep me. But it doesn't do that. So again, for the story elements it's dealing with, it handles them, I would say, as well as they can possibly be handled, given the nature of the subject matter. But that doesn't change the fact that the subject matter makes me inherently like, and it's just not, I don't love it. And also that, like, overall, the thing does start to push credibility towards the end in terms of what this thing comes back from, what it is able to survive, the fact that it basically Kool-Aid Mans through what looked like a stone wall, like, especially considering it feels like it's playing into some very bizarre cliches of this subgenre where, like, inbreeding somehow creates super mutants, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, I don't know, it's a weird trope in some things of horror. There's an entire franchise based around that with Wrong Turn, but I don't know. That's always been something that struck me as weird. But even after that first act, and even though the first act is undoubtedly the best part of this movie, and again, honestly, it works as a short film unto itself. The first act of this film, Tess coming to the house, meeting Keith, finding what's in the basement, and then ultimately Keith's fate, that works as a self-contained short film unto itself. And if you don't want to see the rest of the stuff I'm kind of talking about here, but you do want to experience that first act, you can watch it in isolation. It actually works. So this, I would say, is the boldest second act pivot that I've seen in a movie since Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Because we start out with a movie that is basically only about two people. And by the end of the first act, one of them is dead, and the other, it would be, the safest presumption would be that she's dead. We find out later she isn't. But the safest presumption would be she's probably also dead. And suddenly we hard cut to Justin Long in a convertible singing along to music. You want to talk about jarring. The thing is, though, it works. And it works because of the way Justin Long's character is handled. And this is part of what I mean by, in addition to what I already mentioned, where the subject matter is incredibly well executed. Because he's on a TV show that's getting picked up, a pilot that's gotten picked up. But one of his co-stars has just accused him of sexual assault. And he's being let go as a result of that. And he's losing basically everything really quickly. But he happens to own some properties in Michigan. So he has to liquidate his house in LA. And he ends up out in Michigan, and it happens to be that house that was being used as the Airbnb. Now, first of all, just that house by itself is actually a really amazing image. It's this immaculately maintained house in the middle of this hellishly rundown street. That's actually way more unnerving than a rundown house in the middle of a nice neighborhood. Like, inverting that, I'm shocked I have not seen that before. I mean, somebody's probably done it before. I don't remember seeing that. It's shockingly effective as a visual. But, he meets up with a friend and he's talking to him, and you realize exactly the kind of guy that Justin Long is. You suspect it already because when he responded to, finding out about the accusations, his immediate responses weren't reassuring. But, there's wiggle room if you're the kind of person inclined to give benefit of the doubt to that kind of guy. But later on, he meets up with an old friend and he talks, and it's very clear the kind of person he is. He's like, I didn't force her. Well, she said no at first, but, I'm persistent. Yeah, I bet you were. And I love that he does not get redemption. And in fact, the depths of what a terrible person he is while thinking he's not gets very well explored, because later on when they're out of the basement and he's kind of, reflecting on this and being like, I did something really terrible, because he's found out what went on in that basement to result in the creature that we're dealing with. And he does in that moment see a parallel between the man who caused all that and himself. But it's not a redemptive moment, because he's in his mind already using the extremity of what this guy did versus what he did is like, okay, like, I'm not completely unlike him, but I'm not that. Like, I'm not that. He was worse. Like, I made a mistake, or, whatever justifications they have. And then at the very end, when they're on top of this sort of water tower thing, and he just flat out throws Tess off to distract the monster, to save himself. Because that's who he is. He can rationalize all he wants. He can come up with every excuse he can possibly think of. He can try and literally gaslight a woman who, as far as he knows, he is dying on the concrete, that she actually slipped and he didn't push her, and possibly even try and convince himself that's what happened. As he says it, it doesn't change who he is. And he gets exactly what he deserves. And I feel like it's worth noting that even though Keith is nowhere near that guy, that the Justin Long's character, whose name AJ, I think, Keith is nowhere near what AJ is. But Keith did end up going down to that basement when Tess came up, told him what she saw, said, "We need to leave right now." And instead of just listening to her, he said, "Okay, let me check this, because I don't know if I trust your interpretation. You seem a little hysterical." Those weren't the words he used. It's better written than that. But that was the gist of it. Okay, I hear what you're saying, but what if you're wrong? Let me go and look into it, rather than just believe you. And he gets killed for his trouble. I'm not going to say he deserved to die for that transgression, but I am going to point out his behavior still came from a similar place as that of AJ and as that of Frank, whose behavior kicked all this off. Is it to the same extreme? No. God, no. It's not even close. It's not even close to equivocal. But it comes from a similar place. What I think takes priority over what you think. You say this happened. This doesn't make sense to me. I'm not just going to believe you. I'm not just going to trust you. You say that I did this thing. Well, that can't be what happened. You must be misremembering. There must be a misunderstanding. I didn't do that to you. With the extreme version being Frank, who controls women so completely that it doesn't really matter whether he listens to them or not, because he has literally caged them and put them in a situation where they have no say over anything. There's a lot of strong themes of bodily autonomy and, for lack of a better way to put it, #MeToo movement running through the core of this thing. And it's not window dressing. The fact that we go from Keith and Tess to AJ is not just, oh, here's just another random guy we'll throw in. No, that character was picked for a reason. The ending is a tad sudden. It still works, I think, but it does kind of come pretty suddenly. And again, overall, while I will praise the structure and theming and that first act, which is it's no notes. That first act is absolute perfection, and I will praise that all day long. I don't ever want to watch this again, just because, again, though they are as well handled as they can possibly be while still being present, the specifics really skeeve me out. They just really, really do. And they are absolutely core. It's not a thing that happens along the way telling the story. No, they are 100% core. You can't kind of just shift your feelings about this off to the side. It's a huge part of what the movie is. So that's my own reservation about it. But dang, this thing's really, it's good. It's really good. Let me put it this way. Part of why I wanted to see this, timing worked out well, is because I think I've mentioned this before. I'm trying to watch stuff before the end of the year that I think might make my top 10. Because of my discomfort, I don't think this would make the top 10, but dang, would it get an honorable mention. So that's where I'm at. What are your thoughts on this movie? Because if you've gotten this far, I'm presuming at least some of you have seen it. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon's what pays the bills and allows me to do this as my living. Any assistance that you can grant is of immense help. Even if you can't, like, share, subscribe also help me out. Don't worry too much about it. No big pressure. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. All right, time to thank my highest supporting patrons. Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Emu Delkey, Leotha Boyd, Toy Loli, Becky Sparks, Phrenobulax, The Poodle, Zach, Bookworm, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperol, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Shayla Gourlay, Brendan LaRose, and TT. Thank you for your support. If you want to hear me try and say your name while this little guy tries to chew on my earrings, well, you can check out the Patreon for the support tiers that get you a shout out. Thanks so much. You are a pain in my butt.